CultivatED Marketer, episode 32, a new host. In today's episode of CultivatED Marketer, Matt and I bring on a new voice for the show. She has a serious soft spot for nonprofits, and we're so excited to introduce you to her. Make sure to check out the episode so you get to meet our new host. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
And I'm Matt Tidwell.
And today we're introducing that new voice that we talked about last time. Our new host. She's joining. We're so excited. We kept it very gender agnostic last time. Didn't tip our hand on which direction we were going. But Julie Masson is joining us today. Julie is a fractional chief communications officer for nonprofits with over 15 years in the nonprofit sector. She's got that charitable heart that, I've talked about love, but haven't really covered so much in the show. So we're fixing that gap, certainly with bringing Julie on. She's been supporting nonprofit leaders who don't have comms staffs and coaching those comms professionals through cohorts and training. She just did one we're going to talk about the other day, get a little bit into that. And she's been helping nonprofits make the right communications and marketing hires. So welcome, Julie. So excited to have you be a part of the show.
Hello, friends. I'm glad to be here.
So we need to talk, Matt, a little bit about how we know Julie. So I know one of the things Julie and I got to meet at the KC IABC BCS through an introduction to you. And then I wrote a value-based. Julie and I haven't known each other as long, although we could have had the potential to know each other because she went through the IMC program, I think about the same time where maybe predated me for some of my instruction, but
we almost overlapped.
Almost.
But
I had written a little bit of a value-based LinkedIn post early in the year, and she hopped right on that, sent me a direct message via LinkedIn, and I went, okay, this person I need to have coffee with. So we made that happen. So we have a limited history, but I know you have a more extended history with Julie here.
Yes, absolutely. Let me brag a little bit on Julie, Brent. And first, and I agree. I'm so excited to have her join us as the third voice that we've been looking for on this show, because I think she's just going to bring a tremendous amount of perspective. You mentioned that she covers some bases that we've been wanting to cover for a while, most notably nonprofits, but she's got interest in nonprofit communications and everything included with that. But she has interest in all kinds of areas that I think we've spanned in the past, things like internal communications and leadership philosophy and strategy. And I know she's quite passionate about all of those. And so super excited to have Julie with us. The way that I know Julie is, and we'll give Julie a chance to talk in a second. She gets to listen to us kind of brag and talk in third person a bit, but Julie was a student in the master's degree program that I run at KU, the master's in integrated marketing communications, now the master's in digital and integrated marketing communications. I've recently stepped down from running that program, but still very involved with it. But anyway, Julie was a student there, and just like so many working professionals that I get a chance to work with in that program, I end up learning, frankly, as much from them, I'm quite sure, as they do from me. And Julie certainly fit the bill there. She I just immediately saw how bright she is and the kind of perspective that she brings to this world of communications. And then I started following her on LinkedIn, and she's a terrific LinkedIn follow. And I hope a lot of our listeners will get a chance to do that because, again, she covers really all of those topics that I mentioned earlier. And I don't think there's a week that goes by that I don't see her opining about something on LinkedIn that I just immediately resonate with me. And so I'm just super excited that we've got her here. I think she'll bring just a ton to the show. And hopefully, I have lots of good memories from our KU experience. I know she was approaching it from the student side. Hopefully, Julie, you had similar experiences there.
I was just about ready to ask Julie if she had a highlight or two from her KU experience, a Matt Tidwell in the classroom best of kind of experience. I could ask her the worst of experience too, but
I don't really have any worst of it. Truly, it was such a good program. And ironically, I ran a post on LinkedIn today that mentioned Matt because it was talking about his leadership class. That was one of my favorite classes. in that program. So the crisis comms class, also, Matt, you also taught that, was probably my top favorite class. In fact, I was just meeting with someone today talking about nonprofit comms. And I said, I am not your person for crisis comms. I could probably teach it. I've lived it. I hate doing it. It is so stressful. There's someone else I will recommend, but I love the crisis comms class at KU. I love that program. And I still remember very vividly, I believe it was 2020, because it was COVID, when I decided, like a lot of people, hey, let's try something new, because why not? So that's when I started the master's program. I really wanted to grow and learn in my communication skills, because I kind of learned marketing communications on the streets. I didn't go to, my undergrad is not in communications. So I knew I needed to actually be in the classroom to learn how to do some of those skills. And I found the KU program. And I remember driving down the road in the summer 5 years ago. And I remember having my first call with Matt, and he really sold the program. So I was deciding between KU and Drake, and I ended up going with KU. And it was truly one of the best decisions I could have made for my career.
Yeah. And we should mention that, like so many people in that program, you didn't get your undergrad at KU. You're Iowa State University, I believe, correct?
I'm very much a diehard Cyclone, and I will begrudgingly support KU if they're not competing against Iowa State.
Yeah.
But I do have some family members who were a little bit irritated that I got my master's from KU.
Yeah, that always happens in our program. But Julie, maybe take a second. Can you expand a little bit about, and Brent covered certainly what you're doing now, and that's on your LinkedIn, and I know you're working in that role as kind of a CCO for nonprofits, but give people just a little bit more kind of description of just the rest of your career kind of prior to that and things like that.
Sure. So I began my career as a teacher. That's what I went to Iowa State for. I was an elementary education Spanish teacher, which is not super common. I wanted to be a teacher. I love teaching, but once I got into it, I learned I didn't love it. I didn't love the whole ecosystem that came with it quite as much as I thought. So after 2 years of teaching, my husband and I actually got to work for a nonprofit overseas, where we were working with immigrants, doing water distribution and language classes. And while we were there is where I really actually got into communication. So I learned what I loved doing was creating websites, blogs, writing email communications to people back in the States who were following this nonprofit. So that's where I really got into communications. And then when we moved back to the States, we landed in Kansas City, thought we'd only be here a few years. We've been here for 15. And I kind of became known as a social media girl. So I worked with the nonprofit for 5 years, doing their social media, doing their email. But again, I just learned that. I learned it because I was thrown into it and I had to do it. So I did that for a while. Then I got into digital ads, digital marketing, again, all self-taught. I remember one of my colleagues at one of the nonprofits I worked at, we would wake up early and listen to this Facebook ad podcast where they basically taught you how to do it. So we self-taught ourselves Facebook ads. Eventually, I was a marketing project manager. Then I became marketing manager. Then I became a director of external engagement. Then it was director of communications. Then it was chief of staff. Then it was chief communications officer. So all of that was over the time span of 15 years, all of it within the nonprofit space. And I loved it. But I have since stepped out to start my own business because communications is not a field that you can necessarily step away from easily, especially if you're working like I was for 8 years. I was working in a nonprofit that had a lot of crisis comms. We had to do a lot of news cycle communication. So something came out, it was a policy organization. So something happened over the weekend in the policy world, you had to respond, you had to be ready. Mm-hmm. And that's great for a certain amount of time, but I didn't want to be living that, 24-hour news cycle life. So I got out of it and decided I wanted to help train and teach and support other nonprofits. So now I get to step in and work alongside nonprofit leaders. I especially like helping nonprofit leaders who are leading really small teams. They don't have a big staff. They might not even have a comms staff. And I help them know how to build a good comms foundation. And then I also like coaching comms people who are working for nonprofits. And then I also like helping comms leaders hire, because sometimes nonprofits, they've grown, they're doing well, they grow, and they know they need to hire a comms person and they don't know what to look for. So that's where I've come from and where I'm at now.
Gee, Brent, I mean, hopefully listeners are picking up on why we thought Julie was such a great choice, right? Training, yeah, teaching, obviously, professional development, and obviously communication. She sort of touches all those bases.
Well, you hit on why maybe we wanted Julie on the show. Julie's made a number of big life decisions between moving from the States to live overseas to teach, making a career change from education. So you've made a number of big life decisions. I think coming on CultivatED Marketer may be another big life decision. Why did you agree to put up with me and Matt is really the question. That's really the question.
Why did I decide to put up with you two? You know, I actually started listening to this podcast when I was in the KU program, the IMC program with Matt. And I think that's where I learned about internal communications. I cannot remember her name, but she's one of the top internal comms person in the UK.
Oh, yeah.
Katie McCauley.
Hey, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember loving that episode, and I loved what you guys were doing. And the reality is that I'm nerdy this way. I do love to talk about communications. It is, I don't know, it's my niche. It's what I'm passionate about. And I'm passionate about it, obviously, as it relates to nonprofits, but I'm passionate about in general. I think so many businesses, so many nonprofits, so many relationships struggle because they don't have good communication. So if I got to come on whatever rhythm of a podcast that we have, you know, weekly, monthly, whatever, if I could come on and talk with you guys about communications and help other people or help other businesses and organizations do communications better, sign me up. I'm a helper. That's why I like helping nonprofits, because nonprofits are constantly helping their communities and helping people. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, great. And again, I just think it's a perfect fit. Brent, I know we do have 2 or 3 questions that we kind of teeing up to get more information from Julie. And so, Julie, we'll let you kind of play guest here a little bit to let the listeners get to know you a little bit more and throw a couple of these at you. But first of all, I know, and again, some of this comes from things I've seen you post and just different observations we've had about kind of the areas where you're focusing. But why do you put the importance on internal workings of a company instead of the more common focus of your audience, particularly in the nonprofit space?
Man, I think a lot of nonprofits, what I have observed is that there's a lot of nonprofit leaders who are super passionate about their mission, which is great. I think you need that passion in a nonprofit leader, but they tend to be focused on just getting the mission done. And if they don't recognize that their team of people who are going to help them alongside that mission, if they're not clear, if they're confused on the task, if they're confused on the priorities, well, that mission just isn't going to get done. And so if you are not communicating well with your most important stakeholder, which is your team, your mission will fail. And that's the worst thing that can happen for a nonprofit leader. So I think it's really important for nonprofit leaders to make sure they're communicating well with their team first and foremost. Another primary audience for a nonprofit leader is their board. That's a huge stakeholder. And so that's been a lot of my experience has been working with like a board of trustees or a board of directors. Those are some of your biggest ambassadors. So if your board of directors, again, if there's confusion, if there's not clear communication, then your board is not going to know how they can support you. And a good board should be your biggest ambassadors. Your board should be helping you fundraise. Your board should be getting your brand out into the community, helping to solicit volunteers. And they can't do that if you're not communicating well with them. So that's probably my happiest place. I told a client this spring who brought me in to do a comms audit and coach their comms person. I said, listen, I can help fix your external comms all day, but if your internal team is a mess, it doesn't matter. Because it doesn't matter if your website is good, if your social media, your email strategy is good. If the people inside your organization are not actually executing on the right priorities, again, your mission will fail. So we don't want that.
Yeah, you're just putting a Band-Aid on things if you're addressing the external and you're not addressing the heartbeat of the organization, right?
Right.
Yeah, that dovetails so nicely when you were starting to talk about the internal staff, the boards. One of the things that I know Matt and I saw on LinkedIn that a great pull quote from you was around, I help leaders fix what's broken and build what's missing, and create communications that actually work for the staff, the boards, as we talked about, and donors. When you're working with a lot of nonprofits, and we've had this conversation because that's not the focus of my firm, but that's one of the areas where we have a couple nonprofit or even one charitable client. What is the most common thing you see missing? Is it that internal component? And if it is that internal component, what's the thing within that internal component that, and maybe, I don't want to lead you there, but what is that thing you most commonly see missing?
A plan. That is the number one thing that I see nonprofit leaders and comms people, honestly. Some of my clients I worked with, actually every single client I worked with this spring, when I went to ask them, hey, where's your strategic calendar? Not a single one of them had that. And they said, well, what is that? You mean like our events calendar? You mean our content calendar? I said, no, like, where is your strategic plan for your organization? So I feel like often what's missing is literally just a plan. And sometimes that's a messaging calendar. Like sometimes a comms person doesn't know, oh, I need to build a messaging calendar. Sometimes comms people think, okay, I just need to map out the social media strategy for next week, which one, if you're mapping out only in a week ahead, you are so behind, that's not going to be effective. But two, like it's not just about posting. It's not just about sending an email. You need to actually have a messaging calendar, a messaging plan that ladders up to a business plan, a strategic plan. So the number one thing I have found is missing is literally just a plan. I feel like a lot of organizations would be so much more successful if they simply made a plan and then just executed the dang plan.
And that second part's not easy either. I was just talking with the client yesterday where we were comparing them to some competitors, and they said, well, why are these competitors not doing this? And I said, because execution is hard. You have to make a commitment to do it, right?
Yep. And you need accountability too. You need to make sure that, everyone hates having too many meetings. I get that. But if you don't have some kind of a weekly rhythm, especially with comms, especially with donor development, if you're not meeting on a regular basis to say, okay, here's what we talked about last week, here's our deadlines, where are we at on those? If that doesn't happen, then often things will fizzle.
Yeah. And like you said, it's a relationship, but across all those constituencies too. It's just about nurturing a relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Julie, it strikes me as I hear you talk, and you're a person that spent so much of your career in the nonprofit sector, obviously focusing on communications, but you know the sector so well. And now I'm teaching undergraduates, and I'm having some difficulty. A lot of times they'll say, oh, I want to go work in communications. I want to go work for XYZ huge company, et cetera. And I try to tell, a lot of them want to stay in the Kansas City market, which is a very strong market for nonprofits, right? It's one of the best markets in the country for entrepreneurial companies, smaller organizations, nonprofits. What are some of the benefits? Sorry to throw maybe a left field question at you, but it strikes me that you know this sector so well. If you're a young communicator, what are some of the benefits maybe of going to work more, thinking more nonprofit instead of maybe the big corporation or maybe the big agency that so many of them tend to kind of like to?
I think if you are someone who is really motivated by something that's bigger than yourself, or you're someone who just really likes to be involved in making something better, the nonprofit space is a really good space. It's a really messy space, and the nonprofit world sometimes doesn't do things well. They don't have plans. They often don't have good business plans. They often don't have good strategy because, again, sometimes you have these nonprofit leaders who are really just leading from one idea to the next rather than saying, what are we trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to go? How are we going to get there? So that can be super frustrating. And I will say the nonprofit world, there's a high burnout rate. But if you are someone who really wants to care about why you're doing something, the nonprofit world is really good. And it doesn't have to be something you do forever. Like, the pay is not as good in the nonprofit world. The hours are not always good. Like I said, it can often be messier, but if it's something you can do for a few years, I highly recommend young professionals do that for a few years, because you will learn. Another thing that's helpful too about the nonprofit world is they're scrappy. So you might be the marketing manager, but you're also going to be helping with events. You're probably going to be helping with press releases. Like, you're going to learn a lot rather than just your one thing.
Yeah, you're getting broad exposure that you might not get in another role at another larger organization. You're getting that broad exposure, which is interesting. The focus of this show is really around professional development. So it was great to ask that question specifically around professional development and maybe the foray into the communications or marketing world for particularly in a tough job market right now, right? So I've been hearing getting a lot of feedback from recent undergraduates about how difficult the job market is right now. And so with, great foray into communications or marketing could be the nonprofit sector. But I'm going to pivot a little bit because, this being a professional development show, Julie, you alluded to spending this time in nonprofits. Now moving on into more of a gig role or that fractional or coach role, which is a professional development transition for you specifically. And we really haven't talked to a lot of folks on this show that are in that kind of gig worker. And if you look at the larger stats related to gig work by 2030, I know there's an expectation that more than 50% of the workforce will be in that gig worker kind of a position. And I don't think we've had the opportunity to talk to a fractional leadership type. So how did you get started on that path? What you talked, part of that was your values that you decided it's the reason I moved out of public relations, to be honest with you. Matt, bless you for the whole crisis comms commitment, because that's just a world I don't, those Sunday 6 a.m. phone calls needed to stop. So
I'm glad you got it.
Yeah, you are glad.
You can only do that for so long.
Yeah. So what led you here other than the values, and how have you found the journey to be thus far?
Yeah. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why I left, 15 years working for other people and started out on my own. A lot of it was some of the stuff you just mentioned. A lot of it too was motivated by my family and my life phase. So my husband and I have been in Kansas City for 15 years. We have a 17-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 13-year-old. And people who say that the teenage years are easier are liars, because the teenage years are super busy. And I was a chief communications officer for a nonprofit. It was kind of like a startup. So it was new, which means that there's a lot of mess in the newer nonprofit startup world. It's a great organization, but I did not have the capacity in my life to be a chief communications officer and be a mom and wife and a mom to three kids of three teenagers. I just did not have that capacity. So I had to make a pivot, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice what little years I have left with my kids to give all of my time and mental energy to this job. And I had a lot of travel, and it just took up a lot of my mental bandwidth. And I knew I had to make a pivot. So that's really one of the main motivators for why I left and started my own fractional chief communications officer role. But also the thing is too, is like I said, I really like helping. I'm a helper. I like helping nonprofits. And I realize that there's a lot of nonprofits who so many nonprofits desperately need communications help, but they can't afford a chief communications officer. They can't afford executive level help. They don't, not very many of them. It's the big nonprofits that are able to afford that kind of a salary and that kind of a skill level. So I thought, man, I could probably help a lot more nonprofits if I step in and help them for one specific thing, like hiring. That's one thing that I do, where I help nonprofits hire the right communications person. So I might be helping them hire someone who's at a manager role because they can afford to hire a manager, but they don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to have someone at my level. So this was a way where I could help a lot more nonprofits. And I really just help them in a fractional way for a short period of time, like 3 months is kind of my starting point. I don't want nonprofits to have to need me. I want to help them, train them so that they know what they need, and then they can bring in the kind of help they need at either if it's a part-time person or a lower level. But that's really why I made that pivot.
Yeah. And like you said too, if one of the biggest gaps you see in their work is the absence of a plan, you can come in at your level, at a leadership level, help them establish a plan, go, make the right hire to execute the plan, and then maybe come back on a periodic basis to refresh the plan. Right. So
yeah, exactly.
Which is having worked with so many nonprofits, is about the right size. When you right size that for a nonprofit, it's probably about what most of them.
Yep.
What I was at a chamber event not too long ago, I think in Kansas City, somebody had told me that there were more than 10,000 nonprofits in Kansas City alone.
Wow, that blows my mind. I know
that doesn't surprise me. Huge jump for nonprofit.
I know we have a huge nonprofit world here, but that's amazing. That's cool. Nonprofit likes to Kansas City likes to give.
Yes, big heart, right?
Yep.
Yeah. No, this is great. And you're just doing a fantastic job kind of building your brand in this area. And just real proud of how you've done that and the success you're having. And also, didn't you this was just a day or so ago, but you just did a training, right? Tell us a little bit about that. The response to it was terrific.
Yes. Yesterday, I did a live training. It was my first one ever. I never thought I would do that because I thought it would be too much. And I was honestly worried, this typical female, especially females in the comms world, where we just think we're going to fail at something. So I was hesitant to do it, but I decided to offer a free live training because sometime in June, I did 1 or 2 posts about building a strategic calendar for your nonprofit, and it just took off like wildfire. I added a ton of email subscribers from those posts, and it made me realize, okay, I'm going to need to write more about this. So I do a monthly newsletter. When I went to write my July newsletter, I told them how to build a strategic calendar. And when I was prepping it, I thought I should do a live training on this. I should show people how you build a strategic calendar. So I invited a CEO of a local nonprofit. The nonprofit is Rehope. It's here in Kansas City. And what they do is they help victims of human trafficking. They help get them out and get them housing, job skills, all of that. It's a phenomenal organization. And I brought him on and said, will you be my guinea pig? Will you let me show people how I help a CEO of a nonprofit build a strategic calendar? And then I also showed them in that live training, here's why your comms team needs it. I mean, really, everyone working in a nonprofit needs to know the strategic calendar, and it helps everybody. But your comms person in particular really needs it. So I did that yesterday. I had 133 people sign up, which I was literally expecting maybe 30 to 50. And then 133 signed up. And then I had, I think, 56 or 57 at the most. So I was really pleased with how that went.
That's great.
It was fun.
That's great.
I think I need to do more of those.
So you offered the word help along this discussion that we've had already. Even though you've made the switch to this fractional role, we've already still seen the hustle still there too. So that's another H word to go along with Julie. So Julie, I can't tell you how excited I am to have you be a part of the journey for CultivatED Marketer and being able to
thank you. Share
insights and ask questions, and then be able to take Matt and I along a charitable nonprofit journey for these mission-based organizations. I know it'll fill my soul. So I'm so thankful that you're here for that part of the journey.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. Brent, this ups our game, right? So I'm super excited about it.
I'm looking forward to interviewing other guests and learning from them because I'm a lifelong learner. I like listening to podcasts. I went and got my master's degree at 40 because there was more I wanted to learn. So I'm looking forward to learning from some of our other guests.
Yeah, that's part of the amazing experience from this. And I know we'll learn from you as well along this journey. So, and speaking of learning from Julie, and Julie, she alluded to this during our chat, is if you want more pro tips from Julie, she has this newsletter. So you want to go to visit Julie's website at juliemasson.com. We'll include a link when the episode drops. We'll include a link in the show notes so you can go there or connect with her on LinkedIn. Go visit Julie Masson on LinkedIn and sign up for her newsletter. I know that the subscriber list has been jumping off the charts on that newsletter, so you can get more expertise from Julie, even above and beyond what you're going to get from the show here. And speaking of that, speaking of listening to the show, you want to go back, if this is the first time you're picking us up, you want to go back and listen to Matt and my prior episode where we highlight some upcoming guests, including Lynn Zimmerman. We touched on internal comms just a bit here, but then with Lynn Zimmerman coming on here in another episode, we're really going to dive deep into internal comms and change management communications. And then we have an all-time rock star communications professional in Fred Cook, who will be on the show. So you definitely want to hear some of the highlights and future guests if you go back and listen to that episode with me and Matt. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the show and leave us a rating or comment on your favorite podcast platform. We want to thank Julie and Matt, and thanks for spending time with us today. We look forward to connecting in a few weeks when you'll get to hear from the incomparable Lynn Zimmerman. Take care, everybody. If you found value in today's episode, check us out on our website, CultivatedMarketer.com. You'll also be able to subscribe to us, rate us, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember, a garden of opportunity grows with CultivatED Marketer.